Welcome to the Healthiest Tech Talks, where we're talking about some of the biggest challenges facing healthcare organizations today and how technology can transform the way we work so that patients receive better care. I'm your host, Natalie Tollefson, Senior Director of Customer Success at Optimum Healthcare IT. Let's dive in. All right, welcome everyone to our 9th episode of Healthy as Tech. I am so excited to be here today with our special guest, Optimum's own Terri Mikol. We are going to discuss a topic that impacts everyone in healthcare, which is maximizing the value of your data. And I know what you're thinking, this whole conundrum of how to improve your data, how to make it work better for you, feels like such an age-old question that never really gets answered. But today I'm excited because Terri's going to walk us through a different mindset and a different approach for how to manage data and how to do that using the ServiceNow platform, which is something that many of you may not have considered in the past. And so we're excited to talk about that and all the benefits that that can offer your organization. But before we dive in, Terri, can you tell us a little bit more about you and your role at Optimum, your background?
Sure. So I am a data governance advisor, which means I've had over 25 years of experience with healthcare data. So now I am out there sharing my lessons learned, and I lead our practice for data governance here at Optimum Healthcare IT.
Fantastic. And what's a fun fact you could share with our audience, Terri? We usually do this to help folks get to know you a little bit better.
Sure. So I play 7 different instruments.
Wow.
I'm a musician, yeah.
That is very impressive.
It is quite fun.
I do not play any instruments, so I am very impressed. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Terri. It's a privilege to have you here and your expertise. I think everyone's going to benefit from it today. So let's dive in. Let's not wait any longer. Terri, you've been in this this industry and working with data for so long now. Can you just kind of describe what the problem statement is? What are so many healthcare organizations struggling with right now?
Yes. So if you work in data analytics in healthcare, you are very aware of the fact that we struggle to meet the demand for analytics solutions. It's been that way my entire career. We're just not fast enough. We're not agile enough. We are spending way too much time doing things like finding the data, cleaning it up, figuring out what it means, trying to harmonize it across multiple systems. And that work is very time consuming. Gartner publishes a statistic that says those of us who work with data spend about 80% of our time in those types of activities, leaving only 20% of our time for doing real analytics and getting new insights. So that's the problem that we're going to talk about today. And I think you're going to be really excited when you hear about some of the solutions.
I can't believe that stat. 80% of our time just trying to find data, trying to resolve issues with data. And well, maybe I can believe it because in my background, I used to work a lot and still do with HR systems. So I was an HCM implementer. And I just recall going through that painstaking process of, analyzing the people master and figuring out where all that data lives and where it flows. And, navigating all the different data issues that happen across the employee lifecycle. And wow, it's a huge undertaking. So I do believe it. I do believe the 80%. I've lived it. Well, this is such a great topic, Terri. And, speaking of Gartner, I came across another stat that says poor data quality costs organizations at least $12.9 million a year on average, almost $13 million a year on poor data quality. Like, to wrap my head around that, I mean, it's not even value adding activity where, it's wasteful spending. And that bad data that can lead to overstocking or understocking of resources, missed opportunities, patient care issues, redundant spending on different systems and tools and people, legal issues, if data security especially is in the mix. And so it's no wonder that organizations are looking to point solutions to help solve for this. But I really am excited because most of our listeners are probably already investing in the ServiceNow platform. And there are some great opportunities just within the platform to help with data. Great. So let's jump into the solution because there's a lot to go through here. Just the volume and complexity of data and healthcare is huge. So, Terri, how can we wrap our heads around this new mindset? Can you talk our audience through what your approach is to helping organizations manage data better?
Sure. So I want to start by defending those of us that work in analytics and say that it's not that we're bad at our jobs. There are 3 root causes that I have consistently found for answering the question why we're so slow. One, you mentioned the volume and the complexity of healthcare data just continues to grow, and that's not going to stop. So that's not a problem that we can solve. We just have to get ready for it. The second one is there are too few people who work in healthcare who can actually work with data. And this is an area that we really have an opportunity. I like to say that for those of us who work in IT, for decades now, we've been doing the bulk of the data work for the business, and it's not really done them any favors because they really need to have this skill in today's world. You've got to learn how to work with data. So we've got to get more people out there working with data. And then the third one, which is where ServiceNow really can help us. There is a general lack of transparency inside of healthcare organizations as to where all their data is and where all the information can be found. Really noticeable for people who come in new to the company or fresh out of school, where you've got the internet and you can find answers to just about anything. You come to work in your healthcare organization and there's no place for you to really go and look all this stuff up. So we rely on Phone a Friend, which is very, very time consuming. And when you're new and you don't have any friends, that option isn't always there for you. So the lack of transparency is what we're going to talk about today and how we can use ServiceNow to make things more transparent.
And Terri, I've heard, we've talked a lot about this, and I've heard you use the term or the phrase increasing data literacy across the business. Can you talk about just quickly why that's important?
Sure. So it's my second factor here of too few people have the skill sets that they need to work with data. And because the complexity and the volume is going to continue to decrease, we need more people to be able to work with it. So data literacy has become very popular, and a lot of organizations are sending people to class. In my experience, in healthcare, we don't have time for classes. People learn better by doing. So the model that we use here at Optimum Healthcare IT is to give more people in your organization just a small data role and watch them mature. And I think you've all seen this whenever you engage the business in a data related project. At the end of the project, they've gained some skills that they're going to be able to use next time. So we continue to push more out to the business and divide and conquer and get more people working. That's how we elevate literacy.
I love that. And, it brings me back to the roots of organizational change management. Just like any type of initiative, transformation initiative or implementation where there's new tools, new mindsets, new ways of working, increasing that adoption and that advocacy, that championing of, the end goal across the organization, going outside of IT even is really important. So I love the synergies there that we find with so many other topics that we talk about here on this show.
Yeah. So in addition to elevating literacy, now there's a big role for ServiceNow. So I just want to jump right into that. In healthcare organizations, there are assets which are critical to our business that we take very good care of. our medical equipment, our employees, our supplies. So we're very, very good and experienced at managing assets. Data has become a strategic asset in healthcare, more so than ever in my entire career. Every single piece of data could make the difference in a patient outcome. So it is a critical asset. And yet very few healthcare organizations are using basic asset management capabilities to handle where is all the data? Where did it come from? Is it any good? Who's in charge of it? So these are basic questions that we need to be able to answer about assets. And this is where ServiceNow is going to come in. So managing your data as an asset, just like we've done in those other areas, is what we're gonna give you some examples of how to use ServiceNow today to help you with that.
That makes so much sense, Terri. I'll admit, before we started talking through this, I didn't think about it that way myself, but it makes so much sense. At Optimum, we're helping so many of our customers implement IT asset management on the platform, or facilities asset management, or clinical device management, right, for their biomed assets. And to your point, ServiceNow as a platform does a really great job of managing those life cycles and managing those those issues that can arise. Why not do that for data, and why not do that for analytics? It just absolutely works. So, Terri, can you talk to us about how, our listeners are here, they're like, okay, that makes sense, but how do I actually do that? How do I transform the way that we operate? We're going to dive into a few key points here, and then make sure you stay tuned, because we're actually going to show you in the platform, do a live demo on what it could look like to manage your data as a strategic asset within ServiceNow. But Terri, talk us through those 3 points of how an organization can take steps to begin doing this.
Okay, so there are dozens of things we can do, but I have picked out three out of the dozen that are the best to start with, because they have the biggest business value, and you're going to get a really big benefit from these up front. So the first one is basic inventory of where is all your data. Most of us are using ServiceNow to keep a list of our applications in the organization. We do our best to keep that updated. With ServiceNow, you can actually go a level deeper now and start tracking the types of data that are in each of these applications. So I want to know how many systems house patient medications, how many systems have cost centers, how many systems are using patient encounters, how many systems are using labs, et cetera, et cetera. Just finding out where it all is, where it's all flowing. You can see how that would be very helpful for impact analysis on any kind of change. But it's also very helpful whenever you've been given an assignment, and like, how much does it cost us to take care of a patient who has spine surgery? Where all am I going to find that information? Where's the data about all their before stuff and all the rehab they tried, and then the surgery, and then the post-surgery stuff? So it's a lot of hunting and pecking for where it is. So inventorying this next level down, which we are going to show you later, of what kind of data is in there, very, very helpful. Now, how do you get that to happen? Divide and conquer. I am not a fan of one centralized team taking this on. The days of one centralized team being an expert on all your data are so over, because that's far too much. So we, in our data governance program, we have a role that's called an application steward. And their primary responsibility is to publish metadata about that application, share some knowledge about the application, so that people across the organization can elevate their literacy on the kind of data that's in there and where it's all flowing. So that's our first technique, is expanding ServiceNow to track the kinds of data that are in each one of these systems. And who owns it, and who's responsible,
and who owns it. Yes. Right. That ownership is so important. And spoiler alert, for those who are listening, you might be wondering to yourself, is she talking about the CMDB? And the answer is yes, she is. And we're going to show you what that looks like, how you can track your data points as CIs in the CMDB and leverage all the different functionality that is available, just as if you were managing, an application and an application service. So very excited to dive into that. But next, let Terri, thank you. I just want to recap, managing or identifying, inventorying all of your data domains and data points, and then assigning owners and responsibilities to them across the business. Super important.
So I have two good use cases before we move to the second one. Do y'all remember when we went from ICD-9 to ICD-10 and finding out where all the ICD codes lived in the organization was quite problematic? If you use your application stewards to add that information to ServiceNow, yes, I have ICD-9 ICD codes in my system. We could have assessed the effort within seconds with a simple report. Where are they all? So that's one use case. The second one that I really like is when you deal with data that is maintained in multiple systems just because that's the way our processes are. So for example, your provider master, we maintain that in your credentialing system. We maintain one in your EMR. And for those of you that have employed providers, we maintain some of that in your HR system. In addition, if you've got this external Find a Doc application, there's pretty much a provider master there as well. So they're all being maintained separately. And we have issues where the data is not the same. And that causes so much churn. Why are our numbers different? Why am I not getting the same results? So with this tool, I can go out and select provider master, and it's going to show me everywhere that has the provider master. I'm going to know where all the copies are, and I'm going to know where they can update it. So it's, yes, here's where it all is, but here's where they're actually updating it. If you do this with your application stewards, you will actually have, for the first time ever, a complete picture of your organization's real master data challenges. How many do you have where things are maintained in multiple places? How big of a problem is it? Great to know this information before you go out and invest in technology to solve it. So those are my two use cases for this inventory.
Mind-blowing. Just mind-blowing. Thank you, Terri. I'm so excited to hear the feedback. I think this is revolutionary for many, many people that are probably listening. So Terri, when it comes to the processes for maintaining that data accuracy, that data quality, talk about that.
Sure. So this is the second way that I believe we should all be using ServiceNow. For years, we've been using it to report incidents and to request help from IT resources. What we haven't done extensively is use it to track data quality incidents. When you talk about data quality to leadership or to anyone who works with data, you will hear, yeah, we've got data quality issues. But when you ask them how much and what is the real impact, this is something they're not able to answer without using the big phone a friend change. They've got to call dozens of teams and find out what their quality issues are, how they deal with it. By tracking your data quality issues in Service Manager, you have it all in one place. You can start to do analytics on the things that are recurring, the things that really have impact downstream. You can actually measure the quality of your data. This is going to be so valuable when you start considering using your data for AI, releasing your data for clinical research. It's very, very important to know what is wrong with it. And I'm going to give you just a couple examples of things that this inventory would reveal. Observation patient days. How many patient days do we have of patients in the observation status? It's not supposed to ever be over 24 hours. So hopefully we're discharged or admitting them or discharging them before that. But in some cases, you admit a patient and later the payer denies the admission because it didn't meet the criteria. So you back that out. Then you get approval. So you readmit them. Oops, they denied it again, back them back out. So there's a lot of back and forth in this observation patient area. And sometimes the length of stay ends up negative for some reason. That's not something that we know how to fix because we don't know where the root cause is just yet, but we track it and we can give our customers a percentage of, if you're doing observation analysis and you're using last week's data, you can expect about 10% of them to be problematic because we work an error report and we're about a week behind. So this is the kind of thing that you can put in your knowledge base in Service Manager and have people have access to that. Another one more really good example, referrals, tracking referrals. We do a lot of this. And if you've ever worked in registration, sometimes it can be frustrating with all of the data, the fields you have to complete. You can't get past the screen until you fill all of these in. And one of them is referring physician. And a lot of times the patient doesn't know, or we don't know who it is. So the registrars will pick the first physician in the file. So whoever's last name, AA something, their referral statistics are going through the roof. Again, that's something we want to measure, know how often that occurs. I don't know that that's something that we can fix because we don't have the data on who the referring patient was. So that's just always going to be a problem. We want to report the extent of that problem so that everyone who's using referral data can go and read about that challenge before they use it.
Gosh, I'm just thinking about the impact of having these types of metrics. Not only would they be more accurate, but they would be easier and faster to pull, especially in the context of value-based care, reimbursements. Terri, what kind of impacts have you seen with health systems that are doing this well?
So routing the data quality incidents to the business is very critical, because when you route them to the application team, they're busy with production support issues with code, and they've got upgrades, and they're very, very busy. And these quality issues tend to kind of fall to the bottom of their big long list. Some of them never even get addressed. So with ServiceNow, we're naming the owners of this data so we know who's accountable for getting it fixed. We can then route the quality issues to the person who's accountable. They then have a tool to measure the data they own. What's my outstanding incident log? How do I prioritize this? Who's working on what? Just really give our data owners the chance to manage the data that they own and understand where all the challenges are.
Yeah,
so it's
amazing.
all about transparency,
And all the things that can help an organization achieve is just also mind-blowing. So just to recap, our second point is centralizing how you manage data quality incidents using the ServiceNow platform, much in the same way that we manage IT incidents or work orders for different types of assets and devices. That transparency, routing it to the right data stewards and the right business functions to really own and manage their data quality. All right, third and final point, Terri, take us away.
Yeah, this is a big one. Your reports and dashboards are also assets. They're analytic solutions. They are assets. They need to be inventoried. They need to be owned. They need to be measured for quality. This is something that is very hard to do. Our EMRs are, I know Epic at least, they now have a reporting catalog. So it's starting to catch on that we need to have this catalog of all of our production reports and dashboards. So some of them are getting there. But we have a lot of work that's done outside of your EMR and outside of IT even. And we want to track all of the things that are being manually prepared and everything that people are relying on, information about how to recreate it, where it comes from, because we have to sustain operations. And if people change roles, they leave, they move on, we don't know how to do it. Things like releasing your regulatory reports, you've got to make sure that all of that information is documented and we know what happens, we know how often we have to do it. Just an abundance of information and knowledge about our production reports and dashboards that needs to be more transparent. We can't have that information floating around in people's heads. Couple use cases. My favorite is brand new person to the organization who's in a director or VP role. and they come in, and we may have role-based security where we give them access to certain systems and we give them a set of reports. But what they don't have is a place to go and look at the entire list of dashboards and reports and figure out which things can help me manage my operation better. It's not just the ones that I was given. There could be more out there that are of interest to me. So we want to give them a place to go and search. We want them to feel empowered to use data to make good decisions. And we don't want them to have to rely on phone a friend all the time when they've got questions that data can answer for them. So that's a really good use case. And then the other one, equally important, we don't just have one team of individuals in a healthcare organization doing report development and dashboard creation. There are many people throughout the organization doing this type of work. And at times we duplicate one another because we don't know that the solution is already out there, or there's a similar solution that we could just change a little bit and get this new request, this new report out of the one that's already existing. So this is efficiency. We want to stop duplicating one another. We don't need 50 different versions of a census report. Maybe we need 3 or 4, but we don't need 50. So this is an opportunity to see where you have that duplication and consolidate and combine things to have fewer assets that you have to manage. And then whenever requests come in for new things, the requesters should be out there searching the existing report repository to see if there's anything out there that can meet their needs. So that's the value of a reporting and dashboard inventory.
Yeah, I mean, Terri, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, because when I hear you talk through those challenges, the first thing that comes to mind for me is governance, reporting governance. How have you helped your clients manage that beast to get to a point where not only do they have an inventory, but they also have appropriate governance in place, and they're executing that in their processes?
Yeah, so there's 2 components that I see for governance. One is your basic asset management capabilities. Yes, the inventory. Yes, there's got to be a standard QA process so that they are measured for quality. Yes, there should be some kind of recurring review of production solutions to make sure they're still adding value and they're still accurate. So that's all of that stuff. And then you also have governance on change control, which in the reporting space, you'd be surprised at how many healthcare organizations do not take reports through their formal change control process. And that really gets tough if it's a big important report and someone made a change to it and the next day everything's blowing up. It would sure be great to be able to go out and look and say what reports were changed yesterday. Maybe it'll get you to the problem a little bit faster.
Wow. So you're saying using change control, just like an IT organization would use that to manage changes in any business applications, using that to also govern and manage changes to reports, or even to master data.
One of my most favorite things in this reporting space is how many times a customer would ask for something and we'd move it live, and then they would ask for 10 more changes, and this just kept going and going. If you're logging that stuff in ServiceNow, you now have the ability to show back to the business units, you need to do a little more thinking before you submit your request, because we have a lot of redo and a lot of oopsies for the things that you submit. It's nice to be able to have those stats. Yeah.
It's the domino effect, right? All those impacts that the requester doesn't always have insight into. So, wow. I mean, just so much good knowledge and wisdom here from you, Terri. Can we see it? I want to see this in action. I'm going to actually ask, we have another guest here, Louis Gomez, who's been featured on many of our webinars. Louis is our chief architect here at Optimum. Louis, you've been listening, you've been working with us, and you have something to show our audience about how this looks. Take it away.
I do. Yeah. So we want to be able to leverage ServiceNow as much as we can. And like Terri was saying earlier, we normally get a good start by listing all of our applications and maybe even our application services if we're following that CSDM model and using our enterprise architecture workspace within ServiceNow. But this allows us to take it a step further. How do I look at all of the data points, all of the reports? Where is it coming from? And all of the data traffic that's really flowing through. So what you see here on my screen is the CMDB workspace. And keep your eye out for CSDM version 5 that's going to be released soon by ServiceNow. And it's going to have a lot of these data points that are going to come out of the box for you. But from here, let's go through an example. So I have all of my data points listed here. I'm going to pick on patient appointments, for example. From here, I can see that the CI health, how many critical incidents, how many changes do I have within the last so many days. And then down below, like Terri was mentioning, we can assign some users to this. Who supports this data from a technology standpoint? Who is the data owner from the business side, right? So I can see all of these items here. We're going to use this data later when we get to talk about incidents and some of those data quality incidents. How do we automatically route it? It's going to use and leverage a lot of this information here.
I love this example because I would imagine scheduling data is in several different systems, right? It's not just in one. We've got pieces of it all over the place.
Exactly.
Being able to see this is wonderful.
Yeah. So let's open up the visual. So if I open up my CMDB map here, it looks a little bit crazy here, but I want to zoom in a little bit. We're looking at the patient appointments data point. And from here, I can see all of the report repositories that it feeds. So we were mentioning, how many hundreds or even thousands of reports your organization has. Where is this data coming from? I can see that patient appointments is coming from Epic specifically. And if I scroll up a little bit, I can see all of the service offerings that support Epic. I have ambulatory, I have Uptime, I have Grand Central, which all contribute to the patient appointments data point. And if I go downstream a little bit, I can see all of the report repositories and then also your business services as well. This supports your patient scheduling business service and capabilities. And from here, we can create incidents really at any point. So whether I have an incident, data quality incident specific to patient appointments or report or even the business service itself, this is where you really start to build that map of who's impacted and who owns this level of data.
So I'll just insert a little bit. I want to point out that now you see you don't necessarily have to go buy a metadata tool or a cataloging tool because you have capabilities already. And although we have to do some manual work to get this entered, if you divide that out across all the application stewards and give them a nice measured list of what you need to work through and when, in 3-4 months, you're gonna have it all done. So you've got to disperse that work, get more people involved, and use the system that you already have.
Yeah, exactly. And ServiceNow maps out a really good playbook on how you would crawl, walk, run, fly this type of method, right? This is not something that happens overnight. It takes a little bit of time and it takes a lot of effort from multiple teams to get to this place. But that crawl, walk, run method is really what you're going to want to follow. Make sure you set up all of your foundation pieces first. And as Terri was mentioning, how do we keep this? How do we update this initially? And then how do we keep it up to date? So using data certification that's part of your CMDB, I can assign automated tasks that will go to the data owner or report owner on a regular basis, whether you want to do something annually, something monthly, something quarterly. It gives them a task and they have instructions to go through and certify that the data is still correct, that the mapping is still correct. If anything is off, it creates another task for either an analyst to do some additional work or for the data owner themselves to make any updates as necessary.
So Louis, we have a question in the chat from Wes. Are these custom CI classes? And when will CSDM 5 be released?
Yeah, really good question. So from what I've seen, CSDM, I've seen some drafts out there. I don't think it's been officially released just yet, Wes. I'm thinking closer to knowledge is probably when you're going to see that official CSDM 5. If you look in your Xanadu instance, you'll see there's tables already in there for the data points. So that's a class that's already going to come out of the box. The reports that I'll show here in just a minute is a custom class that we added as a layer in between the data points and the application services themselves.
Why don't you go ahead and go on to that, Louis, since you mentioned it.
Let's go ahead and do that. So I have, sorry, let me back up a little bit. So I have my list view here, very similar to my data points, but now I can look at my report repository. So Wes, this is that custom class that we built to help you manage all of your reports and report repositories within your environment. And let's choose average length of stay. And because this is in the CMDB, the screens look very similar. I can still assign it to an owner. I can still have my supported by. I can still automatically route my incidents as needed. And then I can also still open up my map. My map is going to look very similar here, but now it's going to see where the data points are coming from. So I can see I only have one data point feeding this report, which is my patient appointments. Where is that data coming from? Can always scroll up and then see where that data is specifically coming from, which offerings and which application services feed that service.
So the people who are reporting the incidents have the ability to go in and do some troubleshooting before they even place the call because of this.
Yeah, exactly. And if they do need to submit an incident, so let me change my screen here. So if I do find that there's a data quality incident and I need somebody to look at this item, I can go either to the Employee Center portal and submit a data quality incident. I can also do this from within EMR Help. So if you leverage EMR Help and have that built-in ServiceNow instance in your sidebar, you can access this there. Or we can also include links from within the report themselves. So if you're using Crystal reports or Power BI reports, whatever you're using, we can include links within those reports. So if there's a data quality issue, users can click that link. The great thing about embedding these within the report themselves is you can pre-fill out some of these items. So if they are clicking on the ServiceNow link from within the average length of stay report, might as well just fill that in for them. So let's go through here. So let's say patient appointments, and let's say duplicate patients. And I can give it a quick description of what exactly is going on and then hit submit. From here, we're going to use some advanced work assignments. We can either assign it directly to that data point owner, to the report owner. Since we have all this information within the CMDB, let's leverage that information. Let's bypass the service desk and let's get those resolutions solved a little bit faster.
Incredible.
Amazing. And Terri, I think I've heard you mention, some organizations have a data governance COE that actually receives these types of requests, and then they have the knowledge or at least the connections to be able to manage those. Is that right?
Yeah, and without a tool like ServiceNow, again, there's no transparency into how many are being reported and where we need to dole them out. So what I love about this is you have the opportunity, like you said, to bypass service desk and get things right to where they are. Right now, most of my clients are sending them to one team and they disperse it manually. But this is where we want to go.
Well, and I love with this data quality incident tracking that managers have data now to justify the need for resources to manage data, right? Like I imagine that without that, it's hard to justify an additional headcount or some kind of a, whatever, maybe an atypical role than what an organization might be used to having to do these types of tasks. But this really helps to quantify that time and that effort that is needed to maintain quality data.
And I think, so yes. So if we're looking at a data set for AI, it would be great to come in and run a report and say what kind of quality incidents have been reported on this data set. And I would imagine there's a resolution spot in here. In that resolution, either you've fixed one record or you've implemented some kind of work queue or error report, and some team is working this error report daily or weekly. Put that information in the resolution so that people know, yeah, these incidents are still occurring, but if you wait a week, they're going to be cleaned up. That's just completely, I love the transparency.
Love it. Well, fantastic. Thank you, Louie. Appreciate you sharing that. I know that there's so much more we can talk about, but in the interest of time, I just want to kind of move on to the Q&A. But if you're here listening and you're thinking to yourself, gosh, this approach sounds really great. Seems like a lot of work. It might be, but how do I get started? I just want you to know Optimum has the expertise clearly with Terri here on our staff. And we have the services and the capabilities to help guide you through this process. And as the only elite partner who exclusively serves healthcare organizations for ServiceNow, bringing that aspect to the table and really helping you increase your ROI from the ServiceNow platform. That truly is our mission here. For the sake of better patient care, better provider experience, but how can you increase your ROI and optimize your use of the ServiceNow platform, which can touch every part of your business? That is what we are here to do. So if that is something that you're interested in and you'd like to start taking some steps or doing some planning around how to use data as your most strategic asset in the ServiceNow platform, we'd love to walk you through that process. We're going to be dropping a link in the chat here. Terri has been so kind to put together a brain dump of her knowledge and 25 years of expertise around data and analytics governance in a maturity model. Terri, can you just take a minute or so to talk about what our listeners here, how they can benefit from this resource that you've created for us?
Sure. So if you've ever tried to evaluate the maturity of your data and analytics governance, the models that are available out there today are, in my opinion, pretty lofty, and there's a lot of room for interpretation. So it's very difficult to actually consistently measure yourself. At least that's my experience. So what I've done is I've created a maturity model that simply lists, if you can do these 6 capabilities, you're at level 1. If you could do these next 10, you're at level 2. So it really gets down to these are the specific capabilities you need to have implemented. And I think for anybody that's just starting their journey in data and analytics governance, you could use that maturity model to create quite a nice roadmap for yourself.
Fantastic. So that is in the chat. So please feel free to download that. We hope it brings you value. And now I think we're ready for some Q&A. Scott?
Yes, and the link is there in the chat. And if anybody has any other questions, please do drop them in the chat. We do have a question in terms of maintaining consistency. What would you say are the biggest challenges that you see within healthcare that organizations are really having over time to ensure that the data accuracy is really maintained and consistent?
Yeah, so here's how I've dealt with that with my clients. We are at a point now where metadata and all of these inventories are almost as important as our source code. So when you're using change control to manage all the changes around your source code, we need to be doing that for metadata as well. We want to make sure that as things change and as business changes, we're changing the metadata so that it's always accurate. And remember, it's not just one team doing it all. It's each one of those application stewards that are responsible for keeping this updated. So formal change control is how I would answer that question.
Okay, great. That's excellent. And Natalie, as you're talking about ROI, we also have a question just in terms of aligning data governance practices with the organization's broader business goals.
Mm-hmm.
I imagine that, the data analysts and folks that work with data on the day-to-day can really help kind of drive those goals. Do you have any insights to that?
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. You go ahead.
I'll please feel free to chime in, Terri. But what comes to mind for me is it really is not dissimilar from an approach that we would use with any strategic objective that an organization has set before them, in terms of really understanding the stakeholders' perspective, the executive leadership's vision, and what that North Star is of what we're trying to achieve, and then being able to reverse engineer that back into executable strategies. And what I see is that many of the strategic objectives that our healthcare leadership has, sure, a lot of that goes back to different transformation initiatives, maybe some different implementations of new applications or new workflows, but a lot of that will also point back to transforming data and really improving data quality and our ability to use data more strategically. It all just goes into the same discussion of, how can we apply governance, how can we apply process and use our tools more effectively to achieve business goals. But Terri, what would you add to that?
I was just going to say that ROI comes up a lot when we talk about data governance, and here's what has worked for us. Pretty much any initiative that relies on data, when you look at the ROI that initiative is bringing to the organization, and if the data is not good, initiative's going to fail. So we push that out to the actual business initiatives. What's your ROI there? Oh, that's also the ROI for making sure your data is good. So that's just that works. And plus, you can also do some analysis. Now that you have the reports and whatnot, you can actually go in and do some of your own analysis on planning better. Right. So if this big initiative, like the one we got to upgrade to ICD 910, use this tool to go out and actually plan accurately. Here's how many places we have to fix it. I think our planning is often really hard to do because we don't have inventories of where all our data is.
That's good. Thank you. Thank you both. We have time for one last question, and it's from Matthew. And it is, are there any connectors for ServiceNow to pull over existing data catalog system information?
Yeah, I can help answer that one. So whatever you use for your report catalog or your report repository, whether you're using something like Power BI or Crystal Reports, you could pull some information from there to pre-populate your CMDB. And then the individual data points are going to come from several different systems. Majority of them might come from your EMR, or you may have multiple EMRs. You also want to pull things from your lab system, from your radiology system, your ADT system, and your organization. You could be looking at hundreds of different applications that you use that all contribute to some sort of report, whether it's patient data or whether it's IT data. So some of those data points are going to be a little bit more manual. And that's where Terri was mentioning, is being able to distribute some of that work between all your different application owners to make sure it gets up to date. But as far as pulling your report repository, that's something you could probably pre-populate using a connector.
I'll just add that anything that a connector generates, in my experience, has not been all that user-friendly. So with dividing out the work, you can actually make a huge difference to your business by going in there and manually creating the relationships between things. In my experience, if you're running a report team, you should have a list of your production solutions. You should have one, and you should know what sources you're using. So these are things that you really should have in place.
That's great.
I actually have a question for Louis. I thought people might want to know really quickly. Based on what you demonstrated a few minutes ago, what would be the core entitlements or licensing that organizations might need to have to leverage those capabilities?
Yeah, really good question. To get to that fly model, to the very end, you're going to be looking at a couple of different licenses. One is going to be your enterprise architecture, which formerly known as APM, or Application Portfolio Management. That's going to give you all of your business application services, business services type mapping. And then the second thing you're going to be looking at is going to be your CMDB. So all the underlying infrastructure. Where do these services run? Which servers, databases, network ports, all of the more infrastructure type items, you're going to want that CMDB. So those two is really going to give you that full picture, that fly model of exactly where this information is coming from an infrastructure level and then an application level.
Great. Thank you.
That's great. Listen, thank you everyone for joining us for another Healthy as Tech. If you want to check out the previous ones, they're on Spotify, they're on Optimum's website. Natalie, Terri, Louie, your names all end in E, and I hope you have a Merry Christmas and a very happy New Year to everybody. We're so thrilled that you were able to join us today. Have a great one, everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
guys.